Hello and welcome to the Blockchain and Us, where pioneers and thought leaders talk about their journey in blockchain technology, crypto assets, and the token economy. And I'm your host, Manuel Staggers. This episode is supported by 21 Lectures. 21 Lectures' mission is to bring more developers to the Bitcoin ecosystem with in-person courses. Lectured by world-renowned Bitcoin and Lightning developers, courses teach participants the fundamentals to work with blockchain technologies. To learn more, visit 21lectures.com. This episode has support from Core Ledger. Core Ledger is a blockchain-based peer-to-peer transaction infrastructure provider. It enables businesses to document, tokenize, and trade any type of assets in a reliable and flexible environment. Core Ledger makes anything transactable, literally anything. To learn more about Core Ledger's technology and how you can transform your business onto blockchain, visit coreledger.net. That's coreledger.net. coreledger.net. My guest today is Daniel Gasteiger. Daniel is the founder and CEO of Procivis, which provides citizens government-trusted digital identity solutions built around the safeguarding and self-sovereignty of personal data. He's also the co-founder of TrustSquare and the co-founder of Verum Capital. Before turning blockchain entrepreneur, Daniel has worked in major Swiss banks for more than 20 years, starting as an FX trader at Credit Suisse, and in his last role at UBS, he served as the managing director to the office of the chairman of the board. And now to the conversation with Daniel Gasteiger. Hi Danny, and many thanks for taking time today.
You're welcome.
Danny, you've been part of the Swiss blockchain ecosystem with several projects, and your current project is Procivis. So let's maybe first start with what Procivis does.
Procivis is basically a company that looks to help governments to digitalize, in short. So we are building solutions that help states, governments, even NGOs to offer services to their constituents when it comes to building digital solutions, starting with digital identity, which is the foundational layer for anything to do with government services and any services online, basically. And from there, we build solutions to help them then digitalize existing processes, be it digital registries, for instance, which is a typical use case for blockchain, or our strong vision is that e-voting eventually will be supported by solutions like ours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have any pilots that are already running?
We have been going live with the first client last summer with Canton of Schaffhausen in Switzerland. They're using our digital identity platform since then. We have basically since then also had other projects that we are supporting with the product that we developed. Among others, we work with the Humboldt Institute in Berlin, where we build based on our platform together with David Chom's random sample voting solution, a prototype for online voting for the future, which we'll pilot this year, and other projects. A lot of projects all over the world that actually looking to basically digitalize their identities for their citizens.
Mm-hmm. What's the feedback that you're getting, from these pilot projects and from the governments?
Well, basically, we have obviously before we started studied what's going on in the world of e-government, and the inspiration we have basically has come from Estonia. I've been in Estonia as part of a outreach program for my first company to find startups, and by chance at the time saw how a digital nation actually looks like. If you have a nation that is really digital, that starts basically having digital identity for every citizen, that basically includes digital signing services with as part of this offering, so that you can actually digitalize the whole end-to-end service from the government with the citizens. So you don't have to go to a government office ever again. You can vote online, you can actually request services online, you can even do private sector services directly with the digital identity from the government, i.e. the e-banking solution, for instance, in Estonia fully works off the identity issued by the government. And so with that my interest started growing, and I studied this together with the University of Lucerne. We issued a study how that compares to what we're doing in Switzerland, and we quickly found out that a couple of basics need to be there, and that's how I started Procivis, basically with this realization that it needs a bit digital identity before you can do anything else. And so that's how we then started building what is now Procivis EID Plus.
But digital identity is not necessarily blockchain identity.
No, and that's an important aspect. I think eventually, and anything I'm doing eventually leads to blockchain. But I think we are still at the very early days of blockchain. And so the first solution that we've built with Canton of Schaffhausen's digital identity service is basically a simple cloud-based solution that leverages blockchain technology where it makes sense. And so we have built basically plugins to blockchain if you want. For timestamping, we have built other services around that, but it's fully functional without blockchain. And I think not that we planned it like this, but at the moment, this is what helps us a lot. Because if you go to governments at the moment and you tell them all about blockchain, some governments are really interested because they are building on this hype, and they are basically, a lot of governments try to issue a vision to attract startups, for instance, by saying we are a blockchain nation or we are a blockchain-based government. Like in Dubai, this, for instance, is a big thing. 2 years ago, they announced that they will be fully on blockchain by 2020. So they use this as a sign and a signal to the world about being very, very innovative. But very little materialized so far because blockchain is too early. It's not clear which blockchain eventually will be the standard going forward. Obviously, the public blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they are the strong contenders, but there are some very, very interesting projects in the pipeline that have not been seen the light of the world yet. And so it's questionable to actually start building on one blockchain at the moment as a government. So we can start by basically explaining what blockchain is, but offering a solution that is not yet dependent on a blockchain integration fully. And so we are in the best of both worlds, if you want.
Okay, interesting. I mean, many people criticize identity on the blockchain, right? And say it's not really feasible, nor is it desirable or necessary. So I think it's very good what you said, that some jurisdictions just jump on this for the marketing effect, but it's not necessarily the best way to roll out a solution like this.
And blockchain, basically, digital identity on blockchain is a misnomer because at least the people that do it cleverly, they never put information on the blockchain that is readable or not even hashed. So basically, you not have a digital identity on the blockchain, but you have what is called verifiers or proofs of an identity attribute on the blockchain, and that's how blockchain plays its part. So the data itself, it has to be decentralized. That's our vision. So ultimately, to come to the point of a self-sovereign identity, which is the big topic, so that you are in full control of your data, that you are in full control of who you share this data with, and that you can basically own the data without just giving it away. Self-sovereign identities like this, they will basically eventually work with blockchain technology, but it's a very complex project. It's a very complex vision, and that's nowhere near to be solved. So identity on blockchain is a big hype, but it's very little people understand how to do it properly, because even further than just putting the data on it is people start manipulating with biometrical information. And I think that's absolutely the wrong way to go, because once you store something on a blockchain, on a public blockchain, and you cannot basically delete it again, which is by definition what blockchain is all about, and you use biometrical information, then it's really the end game. Once this is lost, it's lost, and it's not at all the time yet to do such things. I personally believe.
What do you mean once it's lost, it's lost?
If you have a solution that depends on the biometrical information that is stored on the blockchain, and that somehow, the way we do it, we have it on a smartphone. You have your smartphone-based identities or an app in the smartphone, and that connects to the blockchain for proofs, as I said before. And so if that information is somehow wrongly manipulated on the phone, and it can get stolen or hacked, and even if it's just the proofs on the blockchain, it's gone, and you cannot do it anymore. You cannot recover it anymore. And
so somebody's identity is gone.
Yes. And
okay.
not
That's
directly.
not a good outcome.
No, That's not what I suggest to do. And I think anyway, it's too early to really go by these heavy personal relevant information scenarios with the blockchain. That's kind of how I see it. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I mean, you just mentioned one of the misconceptions, people have about identity on the blockchains, that, once it's lost. The immutable ledger may not be the best solution. Then another one with data, you said, the storage on the blockchain of lots of data is also not really feasible. What are other misconceptions people have about, a blockchain identity?
I think in general, after now the hype that we have seen over the last, I'd say 1.5 years, now it's calmed down a lot over the last, say, 9 months, is that blockchain solves everything for everybody, when in reality, we really have only seen the beginning. As I said earlier, it's kind of obvious to me that we are still at the beginning, that these blockchains that have been generation 1, i.e. blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum, personally, I don't think they make enough progress at the moment. And there's a lot of what comes with the fact that it's an open source project with no central authority to actually dictate what the next release looks like. But it needs to have a lot of consensus involved by definition. These things are typically slow, they're stable. This is like the Swiss political system. If you have a decentralized setup to actually govern, like we have here, it's typically slow, but once it's decided upon, it's typically stable and ultimately in a compromise way developed solution. So this is exactly what we see with blockchain. But we have been hearing now for years to the scalability issue, for instance, around Bitcoin or around Ethereum now as well, is being addressed by Lightning networks or the latest releases of Ethereum that should basically go from proof of work to proof of stake. All these things are so slow, and people start to lose a little bit the belief that this is eventually happening. And so that's one of the misconceptions, I think. And if that's not picking up and substantially resolves itself, I believe there's going to be new protocols coming along that will have totally new architectures. And I'm not a technologist myself, but from what I hear, there's totally new architectures in place that have no scalability issues. Plus, that's the open protocols, plus all the private protocols like what we've seen with Hyperledger and other things that are not directly dependent on a public consensus protocol will be basically taking over. And so then it's going to be probably a slow death for some of these early blockchains that are out there, and that would be a shame, because it's obviously, especially Ethereum is now being widely used for dApps, and ICOs have been running with these tokens on Ethereum. So it would be obviously a big shame to see that all lost because of not enough progress and people moving on to the next more evolutionary blockchain coming out.
Let's talk a little bit about TrustSquare, another project of yours. So can you describe maybe what TrustSquare is doing?
Yes, TrustSquare basically. The current version of TrustSquare started just a year ago in April 2018. It developed out of a vision that I had since the very beginning when I left banking and became an entrepreneur, to have a blockchain hub here in the center of Zurich, because I believe the topic of blockchain, obviously the whole aspect around financial services with blockchain, cryptocurrencies and other solutions that are basically developing out of this blockchain vision need to be at the heart where the financial center is, and that's here in Zurich, and that's here at Bahnhofstrasse, and that's why we basically opened TrustSquare here at this place. I was here with Procivis in this building before we started at a co-working space, and then I heard about this VP Bank that was in here moving out, and I thought this is a nice spot for this startup hub that we planned anyway. And so we basically got together, 4 friends and me, to build this TrustSquare out of nothing. We had a vision, or I had a vision a long time ago, already 2 years earlier, to build something like this together with the Canton of Zurich. We did basically a feasibility study to do it. It originally was planned to do this at the Innovation Park outside of Zurich. That didn't materialize. So when this thing came about with this co-working space that we could do here, we just did it, and we started it here at this location. Our goal is basically, as you say, it's a startup ecosystem. It's consisting of co-working space For now, we have about 350 desks that we rent to startups in the blockchain space. That is combined together with our academic partnerships, which is very important to us. So we combine the startups together with the academia to actually work together, because it's mutually interesting to work together. Like for instance, with Procivis, I worked with the University of Zurich on e-voting as a master thesis of 2 students there. And there's many other projects in the building that are working with ETH and Uni of Zurich and then so forth on projects. And so that's another pillar for us with the academic partnerships. And then the third pillar, which basically originates with my first company, NexoSquared, is kind of the community aspect, where we do meetups and a lot of academic workshops and so forth, so that we actually not only internally in TrustSquare work with among each other, but also invite the public to come and learn. And I think one of the biggest topic at the moment still is actually the misconceptions about blockchain and what it is really all about. And so if you do meetups where you explain, be it what these different projects are doing, be it what protocols are all about, or academic research and how this will eventually go and change that big topic that everybody seems to be still talking about, like the energy consumption of Bitcoin, and you educate people, especially the people in the financial center here, you eventually get hopefully much more acknowledgement for what it's really about, and not that simplistic view on this topic that is still commonplace in the banks especially. And so that's another aspect, so the community aspect, where we actually educate and invite people to come and learn.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And you just mentioned it, banks, because we're really surrounded by banks right here. I mean, opposite the street is the Swiss National Bank. Next to us is a very, very big Swiss bank. So it's not just near the banks, it's right next to them. Mm-hmm. Do you have like a lot of interaction with these guys on a daily basis?
Well, I personally have a lot, because I obviously have been in banking for more than 20 years, and my friends, that's the people I invite to come and learn and listen. And some of them are proactively come to me because they're looking for, like I did 4 years ago, looking for an alternative second part of their career outside of the classic traditional financial center. And so they come and learn and have coffee and drink and talk to us about what they could do in that space as well. So there's a very active engagement. Formally, we have no real engagement with the classic financial center yet, because it's still too scary. I think on a very senior level, people still don't understand what blockchain is all about. And then there was this whole issue around ICOs, where banks are very critical still. And companies that are doing ICOs are not welcome to be clients of banks, for instance. And so there's still a knowledge gap between classic old school financial services and the new world that we are actually representing here, as you said, across the National Bank. But informally, we have a lot of engagement with also the National Bank, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. You just mentioned your own background in banking, and you've been a banker at Credit Suisse and UBS, I believe, in the past.
Yeah.
And you mentioned at some point you wanted to do something else. Mm-hmm. How did this transition occur, from banking into the blockchain space?
Well, it was pretty simple. I guess I was thinking of my second half. So I was turning 40 and I was thinking about my second half of my career. I had a pretty successful career at UBS, previously at Credit Suisse. I achieved what I wanted to achieve in a banker's career. I mean, frankly, I didn't really see much future for me. I was at a very, very nice position in my last job, and I didn't know where to go from there. But I knew that I always wanted to be an entrepreneur as well. I just didn't know what to do. I just didn't have that sort of spark of an idea. And so I went to look for this spark, and I went to California for a study trip. Personally took some time out and went there for 3 weeks. And then there was this topic blockchain in 2015. It just happened to coincide with the time I wanted to do something on my own. I went there without a view. I came back with a strong vision around this topic, with me being part of it. Then I basically, as I said earlier, it's kind of been obvious to me that something needs to happen here in Zurich. Because at the time it was already happening in Zug, where basically the home, I would say, of crypto,
Ethereum
and other companies were there already, Bitcoin Swiss. And but for me, it was obviously I would not want to move to Zug in the first place. And so secondly, with my background, I was also a foreign exchange trader. So obviously that's very close to cryptocurrencies. But I never really was interested in the topic of cryptocurrencies. And I really always ever saw the background of the top technology and what it will do to society, the decentralization of business models. So I started in fall 2015 with my first venture together with a colleague, which was called Nexus Squared. And from there it went.
I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, we made an interview back then at the very beginning.
Yeah. So it all started with Nexus Squared. Through that, coincidentally, I traveled Europe, and as I said earlier, I went to Estonia. I found this topic of e-government, combined that with this vision of blockchain. And through that, then we started building this Procivis company. And then with that, I basically started talking to the government. And through the government, I had this idea of this blockchain hub in Zurich. And so we started Trust Square. And so it's a natural evolution of everything I've done since I basically got involved in this topic of blockchain.
Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. This episode is supported by 21 Lectures. 21 Lectures' mission is to bring more developers to the Bitcoin ecosystem with in-person courses. Lectured by world-renowned Bitcoin and Lightning developers, courses teach participants the fundamentals to work with blockchain technologies. 21 Lectures covers cryptography, the structure of transactions and blocks and how they are chained, smart contract language, the Lightning protocol, as well as software and toolkits to develop on top of the blockchain and Lightning. To learn more, visit 21lectures.com. This episode has support from Core Ledger. Core Ledger is a blockchain-based peer-to-peer transaction infrastructure provider. It enables businesses to document, tokenize, and trade any type of assets in a reliable and flexible environment. Core Ledger makes anything transactable, literally anything. With Core Ledger's highly dependable, fast-to-implement products, businesses can reduce costs and improve processes. Individuals can benefit from the full ownership of their own assets and make transactions directly with another party. To learn more about Core Ledger's technology and how you can transform your business onto blockchain, visit coreledger.net. That's CoreLedger.net. coreledger.net. Switzerland has been in this blockchain space for quite a while, and a few years ago, I think some people here started to focus their energy on building some institutions, some, associations to promote Switzerland and also strengthen Switzerland, create a dialogue with the regulator and all that. In your view, how successful have these efforts been?
I think overall very successful. I think obviously Crypto Valley is a brand that is globally recognized. As I said, it started in Zug. There's been a lot of activity in Zug early on, and that's why also the government of Zug basically, I guess, got on board with this topic and this vision, because also the Zug economic center needed some vision for the future, and I think they were very clever seeing this opportunity with blockchain technology, supporting that, and that's been very beneficial. From there onwards, I would say we have seen a lot of movement also in the academic space. ETH had a lot of very famous researchers on board that also came from the Bitcoin environment, for instance. And then we had a lot of players like the Bitcoin Association here in Switzerland that has been very early on. It's I think one of the biggest in the world, very actively supporting the ecosystem. Together with Lucas, my friend, we always kind of built parallel events. So he did the technical side, I did in Zurich the business side of things with our events, and so complemented each other. And from there onward, it exploded basically. And that's where I get a bit more critical. I think people lost a little bit track on the sustainable way of building something and just basically jumping on a hype. And so this ICO hype that started in early 2017, I personally am not so a big fan of this, because I think it did a lot of damage as well now in hindsight, because a lot of people and a lot of my former bankers colleagues as well that didn't do this proactively, but they lost their jobs, and all of a sudden they were seeing an opportunity for themselves because they probably didn't find another job, on jumping on this bandwagon and selling services to startups just because they were a banker for some time. They believed that they are now also advisors in the crypto blockchain space. And there was a big development from very questionable people that were getting involved, and frankly that didn't have anything to offer than some questionable background. And I basically believe that's not been very good for the ecosystem. We also have seen some cases of questionable businesses that were built, questionable models of businesses that were heavily pushed, like the model around just incorporating a foundation in Switzerland and raising some money and then wherever in the world spending that money. That's not something that I think is in the long run very, very, very sustainable. And so it was a bit of a problem. And that's also one of the reasons why I was never, despite my background, never involved in the crypto community in that sense, because I'm not interested in the cryptocurrencies speculation element. Although obviously we also have done an ICO ourselves, and I actually think it's a very good thing in the long run, especially for early stage startups to raise capital. But the way it went, the way it exploded, it was not healthy, and that could potentially have some long-term repercussions on the overall system.
Mm-hmm. And I think just before you mentioned the way you did your ICO, it was a very different compliance approach, right?
Yes, that was very important. Obviously, we are in the business with governments, and if you do an ICO and have government clients, you cannot risk to have some sort of an issue. So from the beginning, we said we need to do this the absolute golden standard way. So we went and basically we were probably the first one that actually got a self-regulated status with one of the Swiss financial services self-regulation organization, VQF. We then also did not only some of the investors, but every single one investor. We did full KYC and AML checks, and we have gone through a couple of audits now with our
and picture ID as well, right?
Everything, video authentication, everything.
Wow,
so
cool.
What people at the very beginning didn't even start doing, or with some simple online forms to fill in and with your declaration of funds, we did the other extreme, and we had video calls all over the world with people in India and in Philippines and wherever people were investing from, which was painful. People didn't like that because they were not used to it. But in hindsight, it really proved to be the only way to do it, because frankly, in this business, you cannot be involved in anything that is not totally transparent. And the way we did it, we ultimately, again, it was a bit more sustainable, I think, because we also turned down a lot of money from the money that we could have raised for some questionable people that were basically into a big discount. So you could basically drop afterwards your coins on the market and stuff like that. We basically took a totally different approach, and we also didn't do the big marketing on Facebook ads and the stuff that is now forbidden. All of these things we didn't do. So with that, we had a little bit more of an effort. We had a little bit less money in the end, but now we are actually recognized as one of the most sustainable projects, because we are actually delivering what we were promising to people that really, not all, but most of them believed in what we're actually also selling as a vision for this project.
Yeah, that sounds like a very good approach.
And so from that experience, having built a sustainable way of doing an ICO that has been recognized, we then built also a company, my third company that is now, that I'm a co-founder for, is called Verum Capital. We basically took that process that we developed for our project Vetri and institutionalized this as a service. So basically we went, and this basically the vision was to sell a proper ICO advisory service, basically building around the experiences we made, that now evolved into much more. It's evolved into a real advisory business for banks. And so banks that don't understand the world of ICOs, that have clients coming to them on asking for bank account opening, they come to us now for doing due diligence on these projects. And these projects sometimes obviously then realize that they are not developed enough on the business side. They don't have the token economics under control. So we are advising these startups as well. And so this is now turned into something that we consider M&A boutique. So basically distressed assets, which there are a lot of them. A lot of startups that failed, that have done ICOs now are out there, and are potential opportunities to be combined or merged with other companies that are probably a bit more successful, and together they can still fulfill the vision that they had, because there are a lot of ICOs that were there that had a good vision but probably not the right team or probably not the right time. And this can be an interesting space to enter as well, in order to kind of consolidate that marketplace.
Okay, interesting. So in from leaving the banking world, it took about 3 years to have 3 companies for you. How did you learn how to run these companies?
Learning by doing, I would say. Obviously, having been in the business for a while and learning a little bit on a corporate level how to run projects, which is something I was also involved in some of my career. So having a structured approach, I also studied that element. So business engineering, I did some studies. I have obviously had some experience in how to run projects. And so building a startup is like running a project. Obviously, you need a bit more than that, but that's how it's done. And that's why I think we are a rather senior team here at Procivis, from people mainly from the financial center, with experiences in banks and financial services. And that obviously is helpful. And then combined with the tech team that is ultra strong and ultra visionary, that's, I kind of think, the secret sauce. You cannot have just the tech. You need to have some business experience, especially if you have a project that is on a strong growth rate, which we are basically, and which is basically the latest of my learnings is the whole investment side of things. If you raise capital through a normal equity round and stuff like this, talking to investors and VCs and all these things, that's where I learned a lot over the last 6 months, because that's a foreign world to me. And frankly, not something I'm particularly enjoying. I would rather build my business than going to raise capital, but is part of the deal. And that's what we did. And that's what we, thank God, successfully completed just now. And so, but you just learn it, and then you need to add the right resources to the different growth levels that you're going through, and have a team, assemble a team that is ultimately capable of running such a business.
Mm-hmm. Of course, you're right that running a project is running a project, be that a bank or somewhere else. But still, these are blockchain startups. It's kind of a different universe a bit. So what are maybe things that were unexpectedly different? Still.
I mean, the one tip I give everybody that wants to become an entrepreneur is don't underestimate the time it takes for building a product, for building a client base, for finding your first client, for eventually now the experience with this fundraising, how long it takes to actually go through a process of fundraising. Everything takes always longer, you believe, and I'm not different, that you have super product that everybody will just want to buy. So in our case with governments, it's even worse. It's not something that you do sell quickly. You need to, especially in governments like here in Switzerland, where it's very decentralized, you have to talk to cantons and stuff like this that are not so advanced, certainly not when it comes to blockchain, especially other than Zug, who is obviously known for this. It takes a lot of time to explain, to do the whole sales cycle, and then to sell itself, and then to build projects and pilots. And that's a long time that you need to be able to survive. So it's a question of money, not running out of money. And then going through the financing side, it also takes a lot of time, because again, the same situation. You believe you have the product, you have the client, and now everybody wants to buy your equity. It's not that. It's just they see every day so many very good ideas, like people like me. They believe they have the best ideas in the world since sliced bread, and the VC people will just jump on it, or private equity people, or some blockchain funds that are desperate to invest in blockchain. But also there, it takes a lot of time, a lot of explanation, especially if you have a more exotic business like ours. And so I'd always say, don't trust the time, that it's so quick that how you actually see it in your own plans. And so add double, then you're on the safe side.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You just mentioned that, time is maybe one thing that people underestimate, also the interest for someone's idea. You see a lot of projects here at Trust Square, and also, in other events or wherever you look, where you may be involved. What do you think are certain things most of them could do to immediately raise their profile and have more success?
I think one of the things I learned in my old job about doing professional job is communications. It's very important to actually start with proper communication plan for everything you do, because in these days, this is true obviously in our private lives for the people that are on social media or promoting themselves on anything online. The internet doesn't forget. And so if you have a plan and you have a communication strategy attached to this plan, make sure that's consistent, because people will always come back to what you've said last month or what you said last year, and they compare that, especially in investment rounds as well. You need to have a consistent plan. You need to deliver on what you communicate about, and you need to communicate very professionally. So this is what I always started with any company that I started, is basically starting to think through what do I communicate when, so that it doesn't haunt me sometime in the future. Don't announce to the world that you do this and that and this, and then deliver only half of that, but the other way around. And then that's a very good strategy to build credibility, to build trust, be it with clients or be it with investors. Again, that's very important. You cannot go back to wrong communication. Once it's out there, it's out, and it's very difficult to correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you have any mentors or role models when you got started as an entrepreneur?
I have some friends that are entrepreneurs for a long time that basically helped me with basic questions. And still today, I mean, every day a new question comes up as an entrepreneur. What tools to use when it comes to HR, or what tools to use when it comes to sales and stuff like this. So that's very important as an entrepreneur that has not had any experience with that before, that you have some people that you can ask. Also, when it comes to financing, you have to have a network of people that you can go to and just fall back on. Mentors, I have basically with Procivis, we've built an external advisory team that basically helped me grow the vision for the company. One was, and this is a friend of mine, one of the Estonian people that built this, what is called the e-residency program, Kaspar Korjus. He's now a dear friend and a trusted resource for me to build the vision for Procivis on a global scale, because what they've done is just amazing. And so that's a very good thing to have. And then other more advanced entrepreneurs, or more advanced also professionals. Some of my former bosses are mentors to me that I fall back on, and now we have basically a proper board of directors that basically help us build this company to the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. If you look back on your career, as at the banks, but also as an entrepreneur, is there anything you'd do differently if you could do it over?
The whole career? No, I think I did exactly the right thing. I was not planning it, but I always had a plan. I always had basically a 5-year vision for myself, be it what roles I would like to do, be it what sort of position I would like to be in, be it the promotions. Basically, that was a plan that I always had, but it was like a more red string, as we say in German, to the career rather than a fixed plan. So that you always need to know where you want to go, and then be flexible at going there, and then that's kind of good enough. And so the same thing with my companies now. I always had a plan to kind of build something around this topic of blockchain, and then one thing next led to the next thing. And I obviously have also a plan now, which I will not reveal, but you have to have a bit of a vision to get to a point. If you have no vision where you want to get to, you end up somewhere else. And so that's kind of it. Yeah, you have to have some sort of a basic plan, but you cannot change it. You cannot change it. You cannot fully plan it. And from that perspective, I would not change anything in my professional career.
If there was one thing that you think should change in the blockchain space in general, or in Switzerland specifically, what would that be?
I think again it needs to become a little bit more professional still. It's still too many people involved. That I always look at it like this when it comes to blockchain personalities. What have they done personally? Risking some own money. What have they done building an own product that can be basically shown to somebody? What have they done developing a vision for this topic? a lot of them, if you ask them, so what is your experience hands-on with the technology? Personally, they experience developing something or having a team built that is developing something, or what is your actually contribution to the ecosystem, one other than just basically charging some fees for some consultancy, or what is your personal vision behind the blockchain in 20 years? And there's going to be a lot of people that really have no good answers to these questions. And so that's the people that I would like to see going away. And the people that really, and again, I'd have one example there, Lucas from the Bitcoin Association, who's done this for free since the beginning. He's built up together with others this Bitcoin Association, which was always an open community for everybody to come and learn and to attend, and really from that built his own company, or is now basically a very, very regarded, trusted personality in that space. These are the people you should look to. These are the people that you should basically orientate yourself on, because it's as much as it's a business, obviously, that we are all in. This is not about just the vision. And there's almost too much vision sometimes also in blockchain. There's this whole hype, the origin hype of taking down all the governments and taking down all the banks, all this anarchistic stuff. It's also ridiculous. And I think there's the balance between the professional people that are just looking at this topic as a money opportunity versus the other ones that just have this naive belief that everything will just be decentralized and we will be basically peer-to-peer in everything we do, is also ridiculous. So the balance somewhere in between is I think what needs to be more advanced as well. And so the blockchain ecosystem, the whole, be it global, be it here in Switzerland, needs to professionalize more.
What's next for you in the coming years?
My biggest project obviously is Procivis. I want to go global, and we are going global with what we are doing. We have a lot of projects in the pipeline that are materializing as we speak. We want to build e-voting. That's my personal vision. I want to build an e-voting platform that actually helps as well Switzerland. We are going through a bad patch with e-voting in Switzerland at the moment with the solutions that are out there. I want to build something that is really working for the future, because I think one vision is to export the identity and the government services that governments can use in the future. But another vision is to export also our democratic system and help the world that is more and more extremist to come back to really governments that are really democratically authorized, and counter that trend a little bit that we see at the moment with more people becoming more extreme because they don't feel they are heard anymore in the governments, and the elitist governments that are out there basically becoming more radical, and kind of bring that back to a more normal Swiss way of doing political systems and democratic systems. And so I believe that's a strong vision for Procivis, that we basically help through technology building more democratic systems through tools that we develop.
Okay, good. Danny, this was great. I really enjoyed the conversation, and thanks a lot for taking time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us today. More info on our guests and our sponsors is in the show notes of this episode and on the podcast website, theblockchainandus.com. To help people find this podcast, it's important that you download, subscribe, and give it a top rating and review on iTunes or on the podcast platform of your choice. I'm Manuel Staggers, and I thank you very much for listening.